Don't forget that you're listening to Night Air. Over 10 years ago, when I was 18, I was in a stage of personal searching, wanting to stand out as an intellectual. Although I didn't have a genuine passion for literature, I decided to study this career because I thought it would impress others and gain some recognition, but soon I realized it wasn't for me. After 2 years, I left the career and switched to business administration, following my father's example. However, during those years, I had a professor who became a legendary figure. He was a recognized writer with several published books, and his passion for teaching younger students made him special. One day, while talking with my friends about a movie I had just watched, The Ninth Gate, which dealt with ancient books with dark powers, our professor, who had been listening to the conversation, suddenly approached. He spoke to us about certain ancient texts, books that discussed dark rituals, invocations, and mysteries we had never imagined. From that moment, we were captivated by an insatiable curiosity. My friends and I, especially Matteo and Gerardo, began researching more about these strange books, looking in the city's bookstores that specialized in rare texts. Money wasn't an issue, as Matteo usually covered most of the expenses, and our curiosity about these topics turned into an obsession. What started as a fascination with strange books soon turned into the search for something more tangible, something real. I decided to take the next step and look for groups that practiced what I was reading about. I found several gatherings, some of teenagers who were just pretending to be witches, others who considered themselves atheists and rejected traditional religions. There were also people who gathered with questionable purposes, wearing black robes, but amidst all this, I found something even more unsettling and dark. One night in the university hallways, I ran into a professor we all called Ned Flanders, known for his kindness and calm nature. This professor, seeing me lost in thought, approached and, in a low tone, said, "I know what you're looking. This might interest you." He handed me a piece of paper with a handwritten web address, and before I could say anything, he quickly walked away, mumbling something inaudible. That night, driven by curiosity, I decided to visit the website he had given. What I found on that page completely changed my perspective. What had initially seemed like a simple interest in the occult and the forbidden quickly transformed into something far more terrifying and real. I found myself unwillingly drawn into a world I had never imagined, and what began as an intellectual exploration soon turned into a dangerous obsession. I ran to the computer labs. There wasn't much time left before everyone would leave. Only a few students were finishing assignments, so I chose a computer far away to avoid being seen. When I accessed the website the professor had given me, the page seemed under construction. Tired of waiting and clicking on empty spaces, suddenly a window popped up asking for a name. Dennis, Hess thought, and began typing all the variations I could think of. It wasn't long before I entered the page. It showed me a Bible verse I don't remember and a local phone number. The message on the screen said I had to call that night. At that moment, a chill ran down my spine, but curiosity overcame me. Although it was already late, past 10 p.m., the temptation to make the call was too strong. With my pulse racing, I dialed the number. A woman's voice, elderly, answered before I could explain what it was about. She said, "Hurry up, we're waiting for you. You must arrive in less than half an hour. It's not good that you're late." What was strangest was that she called me by name, even though there was no way she could have known who I was. Without thinking too much, I rushed to the parking lot, where only my car room, and tried to find the address. As the minutes passed, my anxiety grew. I got lost several times, and almost an hour later, I finally found it was a station on the next block. The place seemed odd, but something urged to keep going. As I approached the house, the feeling of discomfort increased. The street was deserted, and when I knocked on the door, I noticed a sign with an image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, warning against any kind of religious propaganda that wasn't Catholic. That image, so familiar from my childhood, sent a chill down. Why that particular religious reference in such a strange place? In the distance, I spotted a young, very beautiful girl whom I wrecked school. She invited me in with a completely indifferent attitude, as if she didn't know who I was. She made me wait in a small sitting room while she sat across from me, struggling to concentrate. The house, lit by red candles, had a macabre air, like a scene from a low-budget film, but at the same time, the decor was that of a well-off family, old furniture, and an atmosphere that contrasted sharp with what I was about to experience. Shortly after, a woman appeared, whom I assumed was the same one who had answered the phone. She asked us to follow her, and as we walked down the hallways, I realized that the girl who had received me was the professor's daughter who had invited me. This didn't calm me. Instead, it increased my nervousness. When we reached the room, dimly lit by a candle, I saw a large window looking out to an inner garden. What my mind managed to take in for that brief second froze my blood. In the center, on a stone table, there was a life-sized figure of a goat. It wasn't the typical Baphomet image we all knew, but a much more brutal, terrifying representation. The goat was standing upright, with one hand raised upwards and the other pointing downward. What I felt upon seeing this figure was not just fear, but a sensation that everything happening around me was beyond the limits of reality. What was I really doing? Around the figure, there were about 25 or 30 people dressed in red robes. Some of them appeared to be children. Based on their size eyes and gesture, which made me think that this was some sort of ritual ceremony. At a stone table, a man was holding a woman by the head, while another woman standing next to him seemed to be preparing something on the floor. The atmosphere was tense, and everything was happening so quickly that I couldn't fully understand it. This scene became so deeply etched in my memory that every detail remained clear and vivid until today. It was only for an instant, but it was enough for me to understand that I shouldn't be there, even though I had no idea how I had gotten there in the first place. The woman who had been accompanying us made us both lower our heads quickly, as if we were witnessing something we shouldn't be seeing. Then, with a smile that didn't seem genuine, she told us not to worry. At that moment, a woman's scream, distant but clear, cut through the air. The chanting grew louder, a constant murmur filling the house. The girl in the short skirt only lowered her gaze, while I began to feel more uneasy. It was as though everything around me telling me to leave, that something wasn't right there. Even though I tried to convince myself that none of this interested, and I was just there out of curiosity, the sense of danger kept growing within me. Shortly afterward, a man with pleasant appearance entered the room. With a friendly smile and familiar tone of voice, he began talking to us about the community and mentioned that after the mass, he could introduce us. However, I noticed something strange. His gaze became more invasive, and he started touching the girl's leg with excessive closeness. I felt uncomfortable without thinking. I stood up and asked where the bathroom was, using it as an excuse to leave the room. He looked at me, his expression turning serious, almost annoyed, and pointed to the third floor, indicating where the bath. At that moment, my only concern was getting the girl out of that place, even though I had no idea how. I climbed to the third floor looking for the bathroom, though my instincts told me I should leave as quickly as possible. By the time I arrived, the house was growing more and more strange. The lights didn't work, and everything was illuminated only by candles, which gave it a sinister air. In the bathroom, I felt overwhelmed, to the point of vomiting repeatedly. My head was spinning. I was exhausted. If I were trapped in a dream I couldn't wake up from. I wasn't sure if I had fallen into a trance or if I was about to pass out. When I regained consciousness, the chanting had intensified, and it now seemed to fill the entire house. I knew it was time to escape, but as I left the bathroom, the sounds from the rooms around me made me feel even more vulnerable. I tried to walk silent, but the stairs creaked under my feet, as if the whole house was alerting everyone to my presence. Finally, I reached the ground floor, now plunged into complete darkness, lit only by the faint light filtering in from the street. The door was just a few meters away. Without thinking, I rushed toward it. I barely noticed the figure that stood out in the dim light. "Are you leaving already?" I suddenly heard. I turned around, and there she was, the girl from the university, with eyes full of anger, as if I had done something. I didn't know how to react, but without hesitation, I responded, "I respect what you're doing, but the truth is, this is not for me." She took a step forward with a chilling calmness. She said, "You're here because, even though you don't believe it, my father knows what's right for you." Her short skirt now revealed bloodstains running between her legs. Behind her, a huge, upright, dark figure, the silhouette of a goat, stared at me from the shadows. A shiver ran through my body. Without thinking, I opened the door and bolted toward my car, my heart racing. In a matter of seconds, I started the engine and sped down the empty streets, accelerating as fast as I could, trying to escape that horrible scene. As I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just seen, trying to convince myself that maybe it was just a hallucination, the same stone figure from the garden that had now in the darkness become completely real. As I took a turn, I lost control of the car and slid into the opposite lane, crashing into another vehicle. The impact was strong, but for some reason, there wasn't a single patrol nearby that night. My mind was still in shock, processing what I had just experienced. For weeks, I stayed away from school, afraid of running into the professor or the people involved in that situation. It was the sign I needed to step away, and in the end, I decided to leave my study. I chose to study business administration, as my father had wanted. The change was rushed and without much planning, which led me to enroll in a private university in another city. But even though I changed my environment, that experience left its mark on me, a deep unease that courses through my body every time I remember or talk about it. Despite my skepticism, I have never been able to forget what I experienced that night.